Asta was the queen bee of New York, and even her own family weren't safe. After she humiliated her nephew, he faked his own death. But Caroline wasn't even done yet. They say anyone can make it in America, but Caroline Astor was not just anyone. Born in 1830 to the Schermerhorn clan, she could trace her ancestors all the way back to the founding of New York City, a claim many would beg, borrow, and steal to make. Moreover, all that time in America had produced a mountain of wealth. Her father Abraham was worth $500,000 when she was born. And with all that money came big plans for little Lena. After an extravagant childhood, Caroline came out into the world with a bang. After learning the best manners money could buy, she married William Backhouse Astor Jr. at the age of 23. The middle son of the Astor real estate and fur trading empire, William had a lot of money to throw around, and it was one of the society weddings of the season. But there was one thing about their nuptials most people don't know. Today, the Astor family is a towering dynasty, and old New York and the Gilded Age are practically synonymous with the clan. But believe it or not, it was Caroline who was stooping when she married William, not the other way around. As one of the oldest families in New York, the Schermerhorns had much more clout than the upstart Astors, and Caroline made sure her husband knew it. Caroline had been brought up to be unfailingly polite and prim, but the young wife was hiding a dark secret. She quite liked lauding her status over people, and after giving William 5 children, she set about distinguishing herself from anyone beneath her in society. She became infamous as a New York City gatekeeper, and with this job came a strange obsession. At the time, scores of people were rushing into New York to make a name for themselves, and Caroline thought it was her job to perform quality control. As a result, she started fixating on etiquette rules as a test for who was worthy of entering her company. She also began throwing lavish parties, exquisite teas, and an impeccable reception at her home, making sure only to invite guests that were of her social standing. And there was one guest in particular she never failed to invite. At the height of her party planning and social climbing, Caroline had one bona fide partner in crime, the lawyer and man about town, Ward McAllister. Incredibly enough, McAllister was even more obsessed with social standings than Caroline. And together, the mean girl duo took this obsession with cliques to a new level, like a particularly terrifying new level. In order to flex their power, the duo came up with a devious plot. McAllister made an index of the 400, as in the mere 400 people who he and Caroline considered the cream of New York society. In fact, Caroline had such a hand in this list that the false rumor went around that they decided on that number because it was the number of people she could fit into her ballroom. The list was basically the Gilded Age version of a burn book, only in this case being excluded was the burn. And guess what? It worked. For long, Caroline Astor had more than made a name for herself. She was a downright sensation. Gossip hounds begged to know what she had worn to soirees, and sharp-nosed guests feverishly noted that her perfume was a sweet odor, somewhat like wild lavender and garden roses mixed. Many even rumored that one of her barters used to belong to the Marie Antoinette. From the outside, it seemed like Astor had the perfect life, but if you looked closely, the cracks were starting to show. Caroline's marriage to William Astor had been good for both of them, giving him prestige and her even more money. But they were hiding something from society. Even with their 5 children, it was a supremely chilly marriage, mostly because William preferred lolling about on yachts to doing pretty much anything with his wife. This took a toll on Caroline. Although she always put on a perfect smile for her adoring public, Caroline Astor may very well have been wilting inside. Indeed, many historians believe that it was William's neglect that pushed Caroline into her frenzied social life, filling her romantic void with the friends and frenemies of the ballroom. Oh, But William had something to say about that, too. Not content to just snub his wife, William could be explicitly cruel to Caroline whenever he managed to come home. He expected his place to be his own quiet sanctuary, and Caroline's many gatherings often frustrated him. So what would he do? Break up the party, send the orchestra home, and order his children to bed naturally. Still, Caroline was one smart cookie, and she knew exactly how to turn the situation to her advantage. Caroline quickly learned how to deal with her recalcitrant husband. Namely, she nipped William's disruptive arrivals back home in the bud. In fact, they grew so scarce that people began to whisper that Caroline now purposely kept him out at his various clubs so she could curb his outbursts. Still, even she couldn't handle her next high society rival. At the time Caroline was reigning supreme, another power was ascending to challenge her authority: new money, specifically the new money of the Vanderbilt family. See, this now elite family was newly wealthy at the time, and Caroline and her posse considered them coarse and not fit for company, which maybe explains the devastating insult she dealt them. By the 1880s, the Vanderbilts were growing so wealthy from their railroad empire, even Caroline couldn't pretend they didn't exist. Instead, she snubbed them in the worst way possible. She pointedly refused to call on Alva Vanderbilt, one of the leading Vanderbilt wives of the day, thereby assuring she could never come to any of her highly sought-after social events. Oh, but Alva got her back. Right, in her weak spot. Of all Caroline's children, her daughter Carrie and her baby, John Jacob Astor, were the most lauded by society. And Caroline liked to show her daughter off, especially. Caroline's vanity about her daughter, however, was also a gap in her armor. One Alva jumped on. While feuding with the Vanderbilts, Caroline was also busy trying to get Carrie out into society. So, when Alva Vanderbilt held a housewarming costume party in the family's new massive banner, the Astor matriarch was shocked that her daughter Carrie didn't get an invite to participate in some of the evening's activities. After all, Alva had never officially met Caroline Astor. It had far-reaching consequences. Faced with her daughter's potential loss of status, Mrs. Caroline Astor broke down. At long last, she had to actually pay a visit to the Vanderbilt home, so Alva could drop the pretense and actually invite Carrie to her party. With the visit, the walls of high society came tumbling down. The Vanderbilts were finally with the in-crowd. Later, Caroline admitted the time has come for the Vanderbilts. Only as it happened, this entire time, Caroline Astor was ignoring the real threat to her existence, and it was coming from inside her family. We already know that the Astors' picture-perfect family life only looked that way from the outside, but the mess extended far past Caroline's relationship with her distant husband. In reality, Caroline didn't get along with the whole Astor family in general, particularly with her husband's older brother, John Jacob Astor III, or his wife, Charlotte Augusta Gibbs, and in 1862 things really hit the fan. As a new decade came on in the 1860s, Caroline thought it was high time to show society what she was really worth. Accordingly, she and William commissioned a brand spanking new brownstone, which was a very modern and fashionable style of building at the time, at 350 Fifth Avenue, right in the heart of the posh Upper East Side. But there was one enormous problem. When Caroline moved into her new home, she had familiar neighbors: her hated brother-in-law, John Jacob III, and his wife, Charlotte, and familiarity definitely bred contempt in Caroline and Charlotte's case. Huge mansions to live in or not, the close proximity put a further strain on their already tense relationship. Until one day, Caroline got the surprise of her life. In 1887, at the relatively young age of 62, Caroline's friend Charlotte died. Sure, Caroline probably affected all the usual mourning rituals and gave nothing but her high society best when it came to sending off her sister-in-law, but yet There's simply no denying Caroline was happy about the turn of events, and she had one chilling reason for her joy. In the Gilded Age, your family name meant everything, and there was a huge hierarchy about naming conventions. For example, before Charlotte Gibbs died, and she was the Mrs. Astor, a title of great honor after all, Charlotte was the elder wife of the elder brother of the Astor family. Meanwhile, Caroline had to be happy with being the mere Mrs. William Astor. Well, now that Charlotte was gone, Caroline knew the title was up for grabs and intended it for herself. In fact, she wanted it so much, she nearly destroyed the Astor family. In the days following the funeral, Caroline got alarming news. Although she was all ready to step out into society as the one and only Mrs. Astor, her feud with Charlotte haunted her from beyond the woman's grave. That's because Charlotte's beloved son, William Waldorf, who knew how much his mother hated Caroline, wanted to rip the honorary title from Caroline's greedy hand and give it to his wife, Mommy. Enter all-out war, high society style. Caroline Astor must have taken one look at poor Mommy and bared her teeth. After all, the girl was a full 18 years younger than Caroline, and hadn't spent the last decade of her life playing society hostess and building up every ounce of clout she could in various balls, luncheons, and teas. In other words, Caroline immediately came up with a plan, and poor Mommy didn't know what hit her. For the next months, the two sides of the family engaged in a silent feud with each other, each trying to get their pick for the Mrs. Astor to win. Except, well, Caroline was way ahead of the game. By the time William Waldorf and Mommy could even blink, she had already carried away the trophy, and everyone recognized her as the preeminent Mrs. Astor, which is right about when William retaliated with a stunning move. Licking his wounds from the Mrs. Astor battle, Caroline's nephew got a vicious revenge. Caroline woke up one morning in her Fifth Avenue home to find out that her new neighbor was no longer John Jacob Astor's old house, but a construction site. That's because William Waldorf, petty as all get out and annoyed at Caroline, had torn the house down, but it's what he was building in its place that was the real attack. As it happened, the spiteful William Waldorf wasn't just building another stately mansion, he was building the very first and very famous Waldorf Hotel. See, at the time, respectable society people never met in public places. You simply had to be invited to someone's private party to get into the in crowd. He was telling Caroline exactly how he felt about her, and that wasn't the only part of the insult. Besides shoving the new hotel right in Caroline Astor's face, her rebellious nephew also purposely built the Waldorf so that it towered over everything in the area, including Mrs. Astor's own home. This, of course, was a not-so-veiled attempt to tower over Caroline's own social influence. Yep, William fully intended Caroline to be insulted at the down-market building, and oh, she was. With the Waldorf Hotel staring her right in the face, Caroline couldn't help but be offended, and she had the perfect comeback. In a fit of sharp wit, she reportedly sniped about the glorified tavern next door, a statement that had made its way all around New York City and is still infamous today. Still, Caroline Astor wasn't just about words, she was also about actions. She planned her counterattack very carefully. In the wake of the Waldorf, Caroline teamed up with her son, John Jack Jacob Astor IV, to find a way to hit back at their relative. Their first idea was the definition of petty. They wanted to tear down their own house and build horse stables in its place, just in case Waldorf needed a clearer picture of what Caroline thought about them. But then they hit on another idea entirely. Faced with this expensive problem, Caroline came up with an ingenious plan. She would simply fight fire with fire and build her own hotel. Naturally, she called it the Astoria, really rubbing it in her nephew Waldorf's face that she was the one with the family name. It was truly the ultimate power move, but a sharp, stinging curveball was coming her way. In 1892, Caroline received life-changing news. Her husband, William Astor, had died suddenly of an aneurysm. Adding insult to the injury of their entire marriage, he was an ocean away when it happened and passed in the posh Hotel Liverpool in Paris, France. They had never been particularly close, but she was now truly alone in a vulnerable widow. But, as always, Caroline had a plan. Sure, Caroline had destroyed her own home just to spitefully build the Astoria Hotel, but instead of becoming homeless, she gave herself a major upgrade on the domestic front. In due time, she'd built a double mansion further up the Upper East Side at 841 Fifth Avenue. Just Caroline Astor to find even new ways to live the phrase, moving on up. By now, there was no one in New York who didn't know about Caroline's feud with her nephew, and delightfully for her, everybody knew that she had emerged the winner. Waldorf was not a gracious loser, not by a long shot. After trying and failing to oust his aunt with his hotel, Waldorf quite literally ran away to England. But even there, Caroline's power pursued him. When Caroline's nephew went to dear old Blighty, he was committed to never thinking of his defeat ever again. It reached terrifying proportions. After picking up British citizenship, William quite literally faked his own death. Why? Mostly so, American papers would stop reporting what a trounce he'd gotten from his elderly aunt. This fell apart in the most delicious way. Unfortunately for poor William Waldorf Astor, his hastily cobbled together and simple plan, which involved servants just telling reporters he'd passed from pneumonia, was immediately found out. And once word about that got around, journalists were even more ruthless about mocking him in the papers. It just goes to show, never cross Caroline Sherma Horn Astor. For all that, though, Caroline's feud with her nephew had a surprising end. In a strange twist of fate, Caroline Astor and William Waldorf Astor's legacies were united in the end. Shortly after Caroline and Jack built the Astoria Hotel right beside the Waldorf, the two properties merged, becoming the world-famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel, although those buildings are no longer in existence either. Instead, the Empire State Building now stands in their place. As Caroline moved around Manhattan, she kept making her mark. In due time, Caroline tired of her mega mansion on Fifth Avenue and ended up moving into a house that directly faced Central Park. But even in these later years, the socialite remained ever herself. She continued to live with her son, Jack, and his wife Ava. Different surroundings be darned. As Caroline Astor hit her 70s, even her indomitable spirit couldn't withstand the ravages of time. She began to suffer from intermittent dementia, all while still putting on her best face to society and keeping a close watch of her son. And when the end came, Caroline made sure it was legendary. In 1908, at the age of 78, Caroline Sherma Horn Astor died, and she took a whole age of New York City with her. Her passing did not go unremarked. Her youngest daughter, Carrie, ever eager to please a society matron even in death, erected an enormous 39-foot-tall cenotaph for her mother in a cemetery located at Broadway and Wall Street. Mrs. Astor's departure marked the end of an era. The void she left in Gilded Age society was felt for years to come,